Hi.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for the intro. I'm going to let Sanders jump right into this, but first I just want to share a message from our very generous sponsors at SPI Global. SPI Global partners with publishers and information providers to maximize the value of their content online and offline. With escalating costs of production and printing, changing customer preferences, and the need to adapt, SPI Global enables organizations to exploit and invest in new media technology. With a complete suite of digital, publishing, marketing, customer support, and content enrichment services, SPI Global helps companies gain a competitive advantage through their unique and innovative solutions. For over 30 years, SPI Global has been helping companies increase their revenues, reduce costs, improve time to market, and automate operations. With over 500 clients and 6,000 content specialists, no job is too large for them to handle, and we very much appreciate their support. I'm going to now jump in and let Sanders take over. I just want to let everybody know you're in for a real treat. Sanders has pretty much got a ton of information offers, been working really hard on this, and if you like what you see and hear, definitely want you to join us at TOC New York in February. You can find out more information at www.toccon.com. And with no further ado, I introduce you to Sanders Kleinfeld.
Thanks very much, Kat. Hi, everybody. So what I'm going to be doing today is giving you all a brief introduction to HTML5, specifically looking at how it can help publishers do their job of publishing exciting interactive ebooks. So I'm hoping to give you guys an introduction to all that and then leave some time at the end for questions. So we'll start at the beginning. What is HTML5? HTML5 is the newest version of the HTML markup language, which is used for marking up web pages. The same websites you look at in your web browser. HTML5 adds a bunch of new elements to the language that deal with navigation, multimedia, and interactivity. So on the slide you see there, I've highlighted a bunch of some of the most exciting new additions to the HTML language. So on the side of navigation, there's a bunch of new tags that deal specifically with delimiting document content in a more semantic fashion. So there's now a header tag and a footer tag for marking up your headers and footers of a document. The nav tag is a specialized tag for doing table of contents navigation information. And section is a tag that's intended to be more semantically rich than the tag you're probably used to using for HTML documents, the div tag. Section is more specific and says this is an actual section of the document. But what I think most people are extremely excited about with respect to HTML5 is the new multimedia and interactivity elements that are added to the language. So three of the big ones are audio, canvas, and video. And I'll be talking about all three of those in depth later on, but audio and video obviously allow you to add audio and video content natively to your HTML documents. And Canvas is an interactive sketch pad where you can do animations and all kinds of illustrations in your web document. In addition to these two categories of new elements, HTML5 also adds a bunch of new input types. Input types are for interactive HTML forms. So when you go to a website and it asks you to fill out a form, there's all different types of fields that you can fill out. And what HTML5 adds is it adds new forms for things like dates, times, emails, telephone numbers, colors, a lot of great stuff. And in addition, I've just added in a miscellaneous category all the remaining new tags. And there's some cool stuff in there too. So for example, there's the HTML5 progress tag, which can be used to do progress bars. And there's a tag called WBR, which allows you to specify where you want word and line breaks in your document. And there's also specific commands, specific tags for things like command and summary that allow you to more specifically mark up different types of content. But that's just a bunch of tags, and when people talk about HTML5, what they're really talking about is a constellation of different technologies. people take a broad view and talk about HTML5, what they're usually talking about is they're talking about the promise of Canvas, the promise of geolocation, audio, video, and also presentation via CSS3. So when people actually use the term HTML5 in conversation, they're usually referring to one or more of the following next-generation web technologies. They're talking about audio and video media that's embedded in a web page without using Flash or other plugins. They're talking about native interactivity, animation, and games, again, without using Flash or Java or other plugins in a web page. They're talking about geolocation functionality, websites that know where you're located and tailor your content to your current location and area. They're talking about sites that have local storage so that you could download a website and run it offline, say on a phone or a tablet device where you don't have internet access at the moment. And they're often talking about the fancy new features of CSS3. CSS3 is a presentation language and is completely separate from HTML, but HTML5, when people talk about it, they're often talking about the things you can do with presenting HTML content, with CSS3, like columns, rounded corners, text shadows. So I've included here a few quick screenshots that illustrate HTML5 in action on the web and the kind of stuff that people are doing right now. In the upper left corner, you'll see an example of a jigsaw puzzle that's exclusively implemented in HTML5 using Canvas. So that's all JavaScript code to do the illustrations and to allow you to move the pieces around. There's no plugins on that web page. In the bottom middle, you'll see an example of a molecular modeler that again is implemented in HTML5 Canvas, and you can rotate the molecules around and see animations of them. And in the upper right corner, you'll see an example of an HTML5 video player. Again, this is all native video tagging in line. There's no use of Flash or other plugins to implement that. And this site is actually really cool in that it allows you to add all kinds of special effects via the canvas. You'll see it in that screenshot in the upper right-hand corner. There's actually like a picture-in-picture effect that's again implemented with no special plugins. But that's all websites, and what I'm really hoping to answer for you today is the question, why should publishers care about HTML5? And the answer is usually primarily EPUB. So I'm assuming most of you are familiar with the EPUB specification. Well, the latest version of EPUB, EPUB 3, which was finalized back in October of this year, mandates that content documents use HTML5 syntax in them. So HTML5 is now the language of next generation EPUB. And right now, as we stand, EPUB itself is supported by almost all the major e-readers, iBooks for iPad, iPhone, and iPod, the Nook tablet, Nook-Color, the Sony Reader, Adobe Digital Editions. Basically every major e-reader out there with the exception of the Amazon Kindle. So what I've provided on this slide here is an example of these very same HTML5 features in action in ebooks. So I'm going to be going over all of these examples in more detail in a few minutes, but you can see in this slide in the upper left corner, I've got an example of a graphing calculator implemented in EPUB using HTML5 Canvas. In the bottom middle, there's a video embedded in an EPUB document using the HTML5 video tag. And in the upper right corner is an example of a finger painting application letting you actually draw in your ebook using your fingers, or if you're using a desktop e-reader, you could use your mouse. And that's implemented in HTML5 Canvas as well. So let's move on to some of these examples. The first thing I want to talk about is HTML5 Canvas. And what Canvas allows you to do is embed a dynamic sketchpad into your ebook content. So the tag itself is really, really simple for Canvas. And I've got it highlighted there in red and in bold. It's just a simple tag there and with Canvas, and then you have the option of specifying a width and height, which is the dimensions of the actual sketchpad in your browser window or e-reader. And you'll notice in italics that I've put a bunch of text that will show up if you happen to be using an e-reader or browser that doesn't support the Canvas tag. So what that allows you to do is provide a little bit of fallback content for your readers that will show up on the chance that Canvas isn't supported. But that's just making the actual sketchpad itself, the actual physical space you're going to draw in. How you actually implement the drawing on the canvas is using JavaScript. And I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, all the code, but I just wanted to give you a taste of what JavaScript code looks like for drawing on the canvas. You'll see that there's functions for beginning a path, drawing circles, drawing arcs, more specifically to draw circles, and actually adding text, setting background colors, setting stroke colors. So that's how you would draw an element on the canvas. And the code that you see there on this slide here actually produces the following image. A smiley face with Hello Canvas below it. So again, that's all, like, that code draws this image. And that's really cool, but that's an awful lot of code to draw a smiley face when you could just embed an image on your web page. What makes Canvas really exciting is the interactivity that it provides that you can add to your web content. So what you can do with Canvas is you can dynamically update what's displayed in real time in response to user input. And what that really opens the door to is things like animation, games, and basically anything that you can envision with artwork in motion and interactivity with the user. So what I'm going to demo for you now, I'm going to switch to screen sharing mode in a moment, is an example of an HTML5 graphing calculator using Canvas. So you'll see I also have a bit.ly link there that you can enter into your own web browser if you want to test it out yourself, or you can just follow along. So bear with me for a second as I switch over to screen sharing mode. Okay, so you should see on your screen right now an HTML5 graphing calculator. And what I've done is I've implemented just a few small linear equations that you can graph on the screen. So there's a status bar up here that shows you that you click a button below the grid to graph an equation. And then if I click one of these buttons, I'll click y equals 1x. It will draw that equation on the graph for you. And I'll draw another one really quickly. And I've also provided a reset grid button. So that's basically just an example of a really simple graphing calculator to show you the possibilities here. Obviously, this example could be embellished and added to by allowing you to do two-dimensional things like parabolas, so x-squared graphs, sines, cosines, tangents. And also potentially to allow the user to actually type in the equation themselves rather than requiring them to push a bunch of buttons. So the next example I want to show you, also demonstrating Canvas in action, is an example of finger painting using HTML5 Canvas. So again, I've provided a bit.ly link if you want to test it out for yourself, but I'm going to switch back to screen sharing mode in a second. So what I've done here, and I'm calling this finger painting because on an actual tablet device, you'd be doing the drawing on your fingers. In this demo, I'm actually demoing it in a web browser, but what I've done is I've implemented a simple application for allowing the user to draw themselves their own pictures on a canvas in a web browser. So what I've allowed you to do is select from a bunch of colors at the bottom. So I can select purple or red or blue. And then you select a color, and then you can draw right on the canvas. And sorry, my mouse slipped a little bit. And I'm also a horrible artist. But you could just draw pictures. You can select different colors. And again, you can use the white color to erase if it looks as bad as mine did. and you can also reset the drawing. So what I find really exciting is this opens up all kinds of possibilities. I'm thinking for things like interactive children's books where you could allow the user to, the reader to draw a picture with their finger on their e-reading screen. Or maybe a coloring book where they would fill in outlines of existing pictures. So the next topic I want to talk about with respect to HTML5 is geolocation. So actually the W3C geolocation API, which is how most websites implement geolocation, is actually not a part of the HTML5 specification, but it's very much considered to be an HTML5 technology in the sense that it's being used in a lot of next generation websites. And I provided a link on this slide for anybody who's interested in looking and getting more details on the specifications. But what the API does is it provides a really simple method of getting a user's latitude and longitude coordinates in supported web browsers and e-readers. So what a user can do, or what a web developer can do, I'm sorry, is simply add code like you see on that slide there to use the get current position function to get the user's latitude and longitude coordinates, and then process them and use them to tailor web content based on their location. So I'm just thinking in terms of geolocation's value in ebooks. I think there's a few things that immediately come to mind. The first one is travel restaurant guides. Anything that deals with tourists seems perfect for geolocation because you could interactively tailor the book content based on where they're located. Say, give them restaurant reviews for eateries in the area, or even give them directions from their current location to a location they want to go to. Another area would be geolocated fiction, and I've highlighted that because I'm actually going to show an example of that in a moment. And the third area is probably the most avant-garde, but I think is a real possibility of exciting things that can be done in the future, would be geolocated-based games. So think geocaching, where you go on, or scavenger hunt, anything where you use coordinates to find things based on where you're currently located. So what I've implemented here as an example of geolocation in action is something I'm calling a geolocated tale, a very small piece of fiction where there are a few placeholders that you can see in that particular slide, where we're going to get information on the fly and tailor our story based on our users' current location and actually even the weather forecast for that particular area. So if you look on the slide here, you'll see what the before looks like, and you'll see the story with a few red placeholders that say things like loading temperature, loading city name, and loading street. And the after result is going to be what this story looks like if you happen to be in O'Reilly Media's Cambridge office. And I actually did this slide in the late summer, so it was actually relatively warm that day. But what I'll do right now is I'll flip over to screen sharing mode, and we'll generate the same story on the fly, and you'll see slightly different results. So most websites prompt you for your location, so I'm going to click Share Location. And you'll see that this time when I look at the story, and I should probably have code that truncates the temperature a little bit, but you'll see that most of the text is similar because I'm still in O'Reilly Media's Cambridge, Massachusetts office right now. But you'll see that it's actually about 43 degrees Fahrenheit where I am right now. So if you were to load the same example in your current location, you will get different results based on your street address, your city, and how warm or cold it is where you are. So bear with me one second as I go back to the slides. So the last major HTML5 area I'm going to be covering today is audio and video for publishers. So the really cool thing about HTML5 is that it lets you embed audio and video directly into your content without using any special plugins like Flash or Java plugins. So audio and video really is hardly something that's new to websites, but what is new is having native support for it. So you can have audio and video play straight off the bat without having to ask your users or your readers to worry about having Flash embedded, a Flash plugin downloaded to their web browser or Java or any other special plugins. And the markup for doing audio and video is really, really simple. So, for example, for audio, it's just simply an audio tag that has inside of its contents a bunch of source tags that supply the actual audio files in different formats. For the video tag, again, it's a really simple tag. And one addition for video is that you can specify width and height attributes that let you specify the dimensions of your video. You can also specify a bunch of attributes that let you control things like whether the video will loop automatically, whether there will be the usual play bar below it that lets you click icons to play, pause, fast forward, rewind the video. And again, just like Canvas, any regular text that you enclose in either the audio or video tag is what is going to be displayed if the web browser or e-reader doesn't support audio or video content. So one thing you may have noticed when you were looking at the past slide is that I did provide audio and video content in multiple different formats. And you may be thinking, why did he supply an MP3 and a WAV file? Why didn't he just supply an MP3 file? Well, the answer is what I'm calling audio-video compatibility woes. So on this slide right here, I've provided charts that detail what audio support and video support looks like in different browsers today. The HTML5 specification remains relatively format agnostic. It doesn't say all HTML5 supporting browsers must support MP4 for video and MP3 for audio. It basically allows some flexibility here. And what's resulted in that is that there's a different set of video that's supported in Firefox than, say, Safari versus Opera or Chrome. And as a result, if you're building a website and you want to make sure that your audio or video content will play across the board without problems, you're stuck supplying multiple formats. But the same is true basically for audio and video in your e-readers, but from my own experimentation, I want to boil it down a little bit, and what I've found is your best bet in terms of audio-video compatibility for audio in different e-readers is to use MP3. Because if you use MP3, you're going to have support in iBooks, in both Nook Color and Nook Tablet, the Kindle Fire, and the Kindle software readers for your various phones like an iPad, iPhone. And on the video side, your best bet as of now, and obviously this is very much a moving target, and standards are changing quickly, and e-reader support and new versions of e-reader software are coming out all the time. But right now, I would advise for video using MP4. With H.264 compression. And again, that should work without problems on all the e-readers listed below, iBooks, Nook, Kindle Fire, and the Kindle software readers. But now let's look at an example of HTML audio in action. So what I've done here is I've created an audio-enabled glossary, and if you use that bit.ly link, it'll pull up the glossary for you, but I'm going to switch over to screen sharing mode and demo it really quickly. So what I thought would be a really cool use of HTML5 audio would be if there were a glossary where you could click on a button to hear the pronunciation of different terms. So what I've done here is I've added a bunch of buttons to the web page, and when you click each button, it calls some JavaScript code that will play the audio. So for example, if I click EPUB, or MobiPocket, or PDF,
portable document format.
It will speak the pronunciation to you. So there's so many opportunities for audio. It can be a great enhancement for folks that are visually impaired in some way, or it can be used to add another sense to the e-reading process, so that you get oral feedback through your ears as well as what you see on the actual screen. So I'm switching back to slides. And again, I want to do a brief demo of HTML5 video in action. So again, right here, I've provided a bit.ly link if you want to try it on your own browser. But one last time, I'm going to switch back over to screen sharing mode. And what I've done here is I've actually embedded in this web page a brief excerpt from a video that's actually about HTML5 Canvas, demoing the retro arcade game Asteroids implemented directly in a web browser using Canvas. So I'll play a bit of this video just so you get an idea of how it looks embedded in a web page natively.
What we're going to do today is use canvases they're used for client-side graphics. Not got anything on the server generating the graphic. Right. The whole thing's done inside the browser. Right. So you can imagine people using it for charts and those sorts of things. Sure. But what I'm going to do here is create a version of Asteroids. Okay. A very cut-down version of Asteroids. Oh, nice. Which allows to kind of float around the screen. And so you're controlling this with the keyboard. I mean, this is, again, it's just, I'm not used to this being in a web browser, so it's a bit of a paradigm shift. Blows up. Looks like you have bang up top. We're going to use things that are using kind of animations and animations, how to move things around the screen. Oh, okay. So no collision on the asteroid. You just flew right. We just flew through it. And again.
So I'm hearing that you guys aren't actually seeing the video. I'm really sorry about that. I'm not sure exactly what went on there, but let me switch back to slide mode, and I will pop up the bit.ly link where you guys can try it out in your own web browser. Again, I apologize for that, but it's basically a video clip that demos Asteroids being played in the HTML5 in your web browser using HTML5 Canvas. So it both shows you how HTML5 video works and also gives you a demo of what you could actually do in Canvas in terms of some pretty sophisticated gaming experiences. So as sort of a recap of everything we talked about, I wanted to talk a bit about what HTML5 support looks like in today's e-readers. Browser support is really great at this point. Canvas, audio, video, geolocation all work really well in most major web browsers. But in e-readers, it's still a bit of a mixed bag. So the e-reader with the most HTML5 support is the iBooks reader. And iBooks has really strong support for Canvas and has support for native audio and video. And by geolocation, I've indicated sort of. So the iBooks reader supports the HTML5 geolocation API, and you can get a user's location coordinates. But what iBooks doesn't support is outside internet calls when you're inside a book. To do Ajaxy type stuff, or to basically do anything with those actual location coordinates. So you can get the location coordinates, and if you have local code, JavaScript code embedded in your ebook, you can process it that way. But you're not going to be able to access, say, Google Maps location APIs and do anything with the data right from within the e-reader. When it comes to the other three e-readers I have on this chart, Nook, the Nook Color, Nook Tablet, and Kindle Fire and the Kindle software platforms, they both support audio and video, but don't have any support for Canvas or geolocation at this time. Ibis Reader is a popular cloud e-reader for ebooks, and they also have audio and video support, but they don't support Canvas or geolocation at this time. So I've talked quite a bit about HTML5 with respect to EPUB. I know everybody is really excited about the release of the Kindle Fire that came out last month, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the Kindle Fire and what HTML5 offers in terms of doing books for Kindle. So with the release of Kindle Fire, Amazon introduced a new ebook format called KF8. And this is intended to supersede the current Mobi Pocket format, Mobi 7. And what Amazon has announced is that there are some key HTML5 tags that are now supported in Kindle Fire. So on the multimedia side, KF8 supports audio and video. In terms of navigation, Sorry that I had intended for that to be in the next column instead of in the bottom of that slide. But in terms of navigation, what's supported is the header, footer, nav, aside, and section tags. There are some additional HTML5 tags that are supported by Kindle Fire, but those are the main ones. If you look at the footnote on the bottom of the slide, you'll see a link to where you can find more details about KF8 support and HTML5. Or if you Google KF8 Kindle Fire, you should get some of that information as well. What's even more exciting from my perspective is that Amazon with KF8 has announced that they are going to support even more CSS. So anybody who's done a lot of development for Mobi or has used KindleGen a lot has noticed that in comparison to EPUB, Mobi didn't have that much CSS support built in. KF8 has more CSS support. So Amazon has announced that they support media queries. They support border tags. Border isn't actually, the standard border tag is not part of CSS3, and most of the tags I'm mentioning on the slide aren't part of CSS3. The ones that have double asterisks by them are CSS3 specific, but all of these tags are things that either weren't supported before under Mobi in any meaningful way, or support has been greatly enhanced. So under KF8, you have much more flexibility in display and presentation with things like borders, colors, floats, specifying fonts, margins, and padding, table layout in general, and some more fancy CSS3 type effects like adding text shadow to text and doing border radius. So what this enables for Kindle Fire is the addition of a lot more graphical content. So basically what this does is it really is KF8 is Amazon's answer to EPUB 3 and a lot of what's being done on the iBooks reader with fixed layout. With KF8, publishers are going to be able to do things like children's books and comic books on the Kindle Fire. So I downloaded a couple KF8 Kindle Fire books that I'm just going to show some slides of really quick. One is of the children's book, Hooray for Fish. So for example, right here on this slide, you'll see the opening page of this book, and that's a screenshot from the Kindle Fire right there below. And that's fixed layout HTML and CSS for positioning of the text and the graphics. And a feature that Amazon supports is what they call text pop-up. And what that does is it enlarges the font size a little bit and it highlights it in a white box so that you can see the text a little better. And that will hopefully be helpful to younger readers who are just learning and are reading the text. So that's an example of a children's book. And similarly, there's an example of a comic book. This is an example of the comic book Watchmen. And what KF8 supplies is a means of doing pop-up panels for comic book and very graphical novels like that. Where you can flip through panel by panel and have it enlarged and highlighted and flip through the book. And again, this is all done via graphics and HTML and CSS. It's not a PDF or anything like that. So that's what Amazon is advertising right now in terms of features for KF8. They still have not formally released a tool set yet, a new version of KindleGen, or a new version of Kindle Previewer for creating your own KF8 files, but according to them, that's coming soon, and I think there'll be a lot of exciting developments there, and once the tools are released, there will be a lot of discussion around development there. So let me see here, sorry. So that is my introduction to HTML5 for publishers, and if you are interested in learning more, please feel free to check out the ebook on which this presentation is largely based, and there's a link there. You can also find it just by going to O'Reilly.com's website. And if you folks have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me via either email or Twitter. I enjoy engaging in discussions about ebook development and would do my best to answer your questions. And with that, I'm also going to open it to questions right now since we have, I think, about 20 minutes left.
Yeah, thank you, Sanders. That was awesome, and we've got plenty of time for questions and lots of them. So I'm just going to start going through the list that Yasmina has put together for us.
Okay,
and
great.
If any of these you've already answered, just either give a quick recap or we can refer people back to the webcast. So let's see. David Rubin asks, could you discuss capabilities for user-side storage in place of cookies and for mobile, especially iOS?
So is that question, I'm not sure whether that applies specifically to doing, local websites or as opposed to local storage for actual ebooks in an e-reader. I'll tackle the latter first since I've been largely talking about ebooks. So an EPUB file itself can be looked at as local storage in that the way the EPUB standard works is that all resources that you want to display in your ebook have to be embedded in the EPUB file. So what that means is you have to locally store all your images, all your script files, and all the HTML text and CSS that goes into your ebook. So effectively, an EPUB is a little local storage package. Now, there actually is a dispensation to this rule that exists for EPUB 3 for streaming audio and video because an EPUB would quickly and largely balloon in size if there were large audio and video files embedded within it. So those you do have the ability to stream. But in general, an EPUB document itself is local storage. In terms of doing local storage for actual websites for things like iOS apps, that's actually not my particular area of expertise. But in general, the way it works on most iOS apps is I believe, and don't hold me to this if I'm wrong, that you have about 50 megabytes of local storage that your website can request by default from the operating system. And if you need more than 50 megabytes, you can request it, but it will prompt the user when they're downloading the app or accessing the website to ask them if they want to increase that storage a bit. So hopefully that answers your question.
I think that'll do for now. And excuse me if my phone beeps. I've got call waiting coming in. Apologize. Let's see. Mary asks, can you add more colors, change the format of the canvas for finger painting, and add different tools beyond just paint?
Oh yeah, of course. All the demos that I illustrated, and which are also discussed in more depth in the ebook version of HTML5 for publishers, are meant to be really simple for illustrative purposes in terms of what you can do. So the canvas allows so much flexibility in that I could certainly pick lots of different colors, or even create like maybe a color slider that would give users wider control of what colors they selected. Add tools, in addition to sort of what I'm calling like the spray can tool that I use there. Perhaps add tools for drawing straight lines, drawing different shapes, tools for filling in different shapes and different colors. Things like that. The possibilities in general with Canvas are pretty endless. Anything that you can program with the Canvas API and using JavaScript, you can do. So for example, the graphing calculator example uses the Canvas tools for drawing lines to do animations of line drawings. So imagine that sort of functionality being also ported over to the finger painting app.
Great. And I'm going to go ahead and push these questions to the slide area so everybody else can see them in case I'm not speaking slowly enough. Shauna asks, one of the tricks we're facing with ebooks is how best to render the sidebars definition of terms, commentary, et cetera. Does HTML5 offer any possibilities here, that is drop-down boxes?
Well, the first thing, let me answer really quickly. I'm pulling up a different slide here, one second. So one of the tags I didn't mention in my new elements slide, but I probably should have mentioned, is the aside tag. And that's meant to semantically tag things like side notes or sidebars or just text content that's outside of the main text flow. So in the sense of semantic tagging, HTML5 has features for that. So that's a new tag you can take advantage of. In terms of actually presenting that content, CSS3 offers more flexibility in terms of positioning and things like that for putting it on the screen. And you can also take advantage of JavaScript. I'm not sure exactly what you're looking to do, but if you wanted sidebars to be like little pop-up windows or something like that, for example, you could take advantage of CSS3 in conjunction with JavaScript to have sidebars that popped up when users clicked on a button or a link, or even you have the flexibility to allow the user to drag them around. There's a lot of flexibility. Basically, the goal with EPUB 3 and once eReader support gets there is hopefully that if you can do it in HTML5 in a web browser, you should be able to do it in an ebook.
Cool. Cindy Martin asks, how is Canvas Paint support for stylists in regards to interaction, I think she means, brushes? That is it clunky?
I guess she's asking sort of what the user experience looks like. I've found that the user experience in iBooks is really, really good. So if you download the EPUB version of HTML5 for publishers, it actually has the finger painting app embedded within it. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to try demoing it in the iBooks reader and see what kind of results you get. In general, because the code is relatively lightweight, it should work quite well on most modern browsers and in the iBooks reader. iBooks is the only e-reader that really supports Canvas meaningfully enough to actually have the demo work. But you could also do the demo in mobile web browsers and things like that. And user experience is going to depend on, if you were doing it on an Android phone, for example, in your web browser, it's going to depend on your internet connection a bit to start, and also just the processor in the phone and the speed. But basically, I think that the user experience is pretty good in iBooks, and I'm hopeful that as other e-readers expand their Canvas support, that it'll work pretty well. And for my demo, hopefully you can see that it works pretty decently in modern web desktop browsers as well.
Great. Renee asks, how do you add text entry functionality to EPUB 3 files, such as a quiz? Do you know of any examples of this?
To be honest, I don't know of any examples offhand of it being done, but the way you would do it is most likely, hold on one second, let me go. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the slides advancing properly. So I was talking a bit about input types before. So if you look in the left column, there are various input tags that you can use within a form element to solicit different types of information. You probably don't need anything that fancy for just doing a simple quiz where you're asking for things like people's names or asking them quizzes about specific questions. You could probably just use a standard text input type. But the way you would do it most likely is you'd use those input tags inside a form to make the actual fields, and then you would have to rely on JavaScript to actually process that information. So that, I don't know of any examples offhand. I will definitely look, and if I do find any, I will tweet them. But I'm pretty sure it should be doable. The one thing to keep in mind with respect to having it work in iBooks is, again, you can put all the JavaScript code you want locally inside your ebook, but you're not going to be able to access remote resources on the internet and bring back things through AJAX calls or stuff like that. So what you would need to do is basically have all your code for processing the quiz locally and give your response locally. So all that information would need to be embedded in the ebook, but it should definitely be feasible.
Cool. And I will add to that, if some of the listeners, attendees today have other things that they can add to anything Sandra's saying, please feel free to tweet them with the TOCCON hashtag, and that way we can keep the conversation going. I'm going to ask, let's see, Keith Shaw asks, what about a downloadable font support in ebooks?
I'm not sure what you mean by downloadable font support, but the EPUB standard supports embedded fonts. So you can embed fonts in your EPUB by including the actual OPF or TrueType fonts in the EPUB zip itself, and then you put references to them within the manifest inside the content OPF file. And then in addition to that, you may want to add handling in your CSS to pull in those different fonts. With respect to embedded fonts, you're somewhat at the mercy of different e-readers in terms of whether they will actually honor your embedded fonts or not. And when you're thinking about embedded fonts, a really important thing to note is that a lot of the most popular e-readers right now, especially iBooks, allows readers to change the font size, to change the font type, to change the font style to whatever they prefer. So at O'Reilly, our stance on embedded fonts is that we do embed fonts for richer glyph support, especially because we do a lot of code, we use a lot of Unicode special characters at different times, so we embed fonts for support for that, and also special monospace fonts for rendering code. But we want users to have the flexibility to specify and pick the fonts that they like and that best add to their reading experience. So it's a tricky tension between having books look the way you want and also the premise behind EPUB of being a reflowable, flexible format, allowing readers to select their own specs, basically, to pick the fonts that they like, to pick the font size they like. But again, EPUB supports embedding fonts.
Great. Let's see. Cindy Martin asks, are there any voice recognition tags, SSML support, or current snippets to integrate speech-to-text support or navigation-related features?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer pretty generally because I don't feel I have a really good specific answer. In terms of voice recognition, I'm not aware of any support for that. And keep in mind that most e-readers don't have microphones that would let you talk into them. But in terms of text-to-speech, they're supporting EPUB 3 for audio overlays, which allow you to add sort of text-to-speech functionality, or also to include your own audio files within an EPUB, so that users can listen along and have an audio track spoken to them of the EPUB text. So I'd encourage you to, if you go to the IDPF website, idpf.com, and go to the section on the EPUB 3 spec, there's a section on audio overlays that hopefully goes into more depth about text-to-speech and audio tracks for EPUBs than I can give you off the bat, and I'm not an expert in it by any means either. So.
Well, I think that's a good answer, and actually, a really good question. We've got a few people who are asking about audio and video support in Kindle. Are you certain about audio and video support in Kindle? These tags are not listed in the K-Fate supported tag list.
I'm pretty sure that it is supported from what I've heard anecdotally. One of the problems is that Amazon hasn't officially released their tools yet. So I believe audio and video support isn't listed on their websites, but from what I've heard anecdotally, I think audio and video is supported. But because the tools haven't been released yet, a lot of it is a bit of a guessing game. And again, the caveat with all the stuff I've documented on the slides is that it's based on information that's been reported, and until actual tools are released, and until these things actually exist in the wild, we won't know for sure exactly what KF8 looks like. I do know, putting aside Kindle Fire, there are enhanced audio and video ebooks out there that work on the Kindle software e-readers like iPhone and iPad, and as far as I can't imagine any reason why Amazon would not want to extend that support to Kindle Fire, especially since the Kindle Fire display looks very similar when displaying standard Mobi content to what you'd see on a Kindle for iPhone or Kindle for iPad. I believe that there's a lot of books out there right now that take advantage of a lot of this fixed layout stuff, like the comic books and children's books I've displayed. So based on that, I would assume that there's going to be a lot available to what you can do with KF8. But much of it is still to be determined, and I'm hopeful when TOC New York rolls around in a few months, we'll have even more to talk about with KF8.
Yes, good thing, because you'll have lots to talk about in your session.
I hope so, yes.
Okay, well, let's see. Matt asks, what are the key HTML5 limitations within EPUB 3? And before you answer, I just want to let everybody know whose questions aren't going to get answered here. I'm going to go ahead and save this and all of your questions and forward them to Sanders so he can at least look at them and possibly, if you do email him or if we put together an article, he's got plenty to talk about. So just wanted to throw that in there because we're coming up on the hour. So yes, please, Sanders, what are the key HTML5 limitations within EPUB 3?
So the way the EPUB spec is written is such that EPUB 3 supports basically all of HTML5. So in that sense, there aren't limitations, but the way the EPUB spec is written is such that support in e-readers for certain aspects of HTML5 is optional. So for example, scripting support is optional. Support for audio and video is optional. So that leaves e-readers at their discretion to whether they support a lot of these multimedia and interactive features. So as a result, you can write an EPUB 3 that includes embedded audio and video, for example, and then imagine that a customer downloads that EPUB to an e-ink EPUB reader, like say the Sony reader or the standard Nook e-ink device that doesn't support video. It's your responsibility to include fallbacks to account for that. And I think one of the big challenges, and one of the biggest challenges I face in doing ebook development for O'Reilly, is that there is such a diversity of e-readers out there and such a diversity of features that they support. Reading an ebook on an iPad is a very different experience than reading an EPUB on an e-ink Sony reader. And so there's a lot of tension when you're drafting a spec between supporting all the latest and greatest features, but also having something that, a spec that works for both an e-ink and an LCD touchscreen platform. So the way the EPUB 3 spec is written is that a lot of these multimedia and interactive features are optional in terms of support based on, left to the e-reader's discretion. So as a result, from my perspective, the limitation is less in what you can do with HTML5 and more how broadly you want to distribute it versus, what platforms you want to target. The possibilities right now are much greater for iBooks than for any other e-reader. So if you want to get out the gate running right now with a lot of HTML5 interactive stuff in iBooks 1.5, there's a ton you can do. But if it's important to you to support other e-readers, you may want to build in fallbacks or hold back a little bit until more wider HTML5 support is present. And none of the major e-readers officially support EPUB 3 right now. iBooks supports a lot of HTML5 features. They support Canvas, but they still don't officially support the EPUB 3 specification. And again, I'm hoping in a few months a lot of this will be changing and EPUB 3 support will be rolled out more widely, and some of these challenges will be mitigated a little bit.
Well, thank you. You know, we're just about at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and make that our last question for you, Sanders. But let the attendees know that Sanders very graciously, in one of the slides, did give out his email address and ways to get in touch with him. So if you have questions or just want to talk about all this great stuff, please contact him directly. And again, he'll be at TOC this February, and we'll be doing a lot more information on our site and in our articles and newsletter, et cetera. So keep in touch with us. And with that, Sanders, thanks so much. And Yaz, I think you had a few things to follow up with.
Yes, thank you so much, Sanders. Thank you, Kat.
Thanks.
And on behalf of O'Reilly Media, we would like to say a very big thank you to our webcast sponsor today, SPI Global. SPI Global partners with publishers and information providers to maximize the value of their content online and offline. With escalating costs of production and printing, changing customer preferences, and the need to adapt, SPI Global enables organizations to exploit and invest in new media technology. With a complete suite of digital, publishing, marketing, customer support, and content enrichment services, SPI Global helps companies gain a competitive advantage through their unique and innovative solutions. For over 30 years, SPI Global has been helping companies increase their revenues, reduce costs, improve time to market, and automate operations. With over 500 clients and 6,000 content specialists, no job is too large for them to handle. Thank you again, SPI Global. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Sanders. Thank you, everyone, for attending our webcast today. This will conclude the event. Goodbye, everyone.